What is your definition of a bad day? Waking up late? Spilling hot coffee on your white shirt? Or maybe your phone dying in the middle of traffic? Now, try to imagine a machine designed with the sole purpose of tearing your limbs from their sockets, or a chair that turns gravity into your cruelest enemy. Welcome to the Middle Ages, a time when human creativity wasn't focused on art or science, but on the engineering of absolute agony. Today, we aren't talking about quick executions. We are talking about devices crafted to keep a victim alive for as long as biologically possible in a living hell. These machines didn't just break bodies, they pulverized souls, turning the bravest warriors into weeping children begging for death.
Yes, Father, I confess.
Do you have the stomach to hear this list?
I'm guilty of
and
the
more
charges.
importantly,
Whatever they say
are you
I
sure
did,
you wouldn't confess to crimes you never committed just to avoid them? Take a deep breath. We are descending into history's darkest dungeon. First, meet the king of torture devices, the rack. At first glance, it looks harmless, a simple rectangular wooden frame, almost like a crude bed, but do not let the simplicity fool you. Once your wrists and ankles are tied to the rollers at either end, the nightmare begins. Imagine the sound. Click, click, click. The ratchet turns. Inch by inch, your body is stretched. At first, it feels like a workout gone wrong, but then you hear a sickening, dry pop. That is your shoulder blade being ripped from its socket, then your hips, then your knees. Your ligaments don't snap immediately. They stretch like over-tightened guitar strings until they finally burst. John Frith, an English monk in 1533, endured this hell for denying the Pope. Legend says his screams filled the Tower of London, drowning out the wind. But the scariest part? The torturer could stop, go eat lunch, and leave you hanging there with your joints dislocated, letting the pain settle into every fiber of your being. If the rack is about stretching, the Iron Maiden is about eternal confinement. It stands as an iron coffin shaped like a woman with a blank, stoic face. But inside that cold shell lies a forest of sharp spikes. And here is the cruelty. The spikes weren't placed randomly. The designer was a sick genius. The spikes were positioned to pierce your eyes, shoulders, chest, and thighs, but to miss vital organs like the heart or lungs. The goal wasn't to kill you, it was to keep you bleeding. When the door slammed shut, darkness swallowed you. You couldn't move. You couldn't lean back. You couldn't even sleep. Imagine being trapped in there for 2 days.
Don't
blood
struggle.
pooling at your
This
feet.
is a lover's embrace.
The smell of infection rising in the cramped space.
Please, mercy.
The only sound being your own frantic heartbeat. The Iron Maiden didn't kill with wounds. It killed with panic, infection, and slow blood loss. It was a hug no one wanted to receive. If you think physical pain is the limit, the Judas Cradle will teach you about humiliation. This wasn't a complex machine. It was simply a wooden pyramid with a razor-sharp point mounted on a stool. The victim was stripped naked, hoisted into the air by ropes, and slowly lowered so the tip of the pyramid entered the anus or vagina. Why was it so terrifying? Because the torturer didn't use force. He used gravity and exhaustion. You had to use your own arm and abdominal muscles to hold yourself up, hovering over the point. But humans aren't machines. Eventually, your muscles would fail, you would collapse, and the pyramid would tear you apart from the inside out. In 1599, a woman in Venice endured this for hours while a crowd laughed at her naked, trembling body. To make it worse, the device was rarely washed. Blood, pus, and waste from previous victims remained on the wood, turning it into a biological weapon.
It seems
if
your
the pain
strength
didn't kill
has
you,
finally
the
left
gangrene
you, my
would
dear.
days later. Look at this ornate metal device shaped like a pear. It consists of 3 or 4 metal petals and a screw at the base. It looks almost decorative, but when inserted into a victim's mouth, throat, or other private areas, and the screw is turned, the petals bloom. But they don't bloom like a flower. They separate with immense force. Used on liars, blasphemers, or accused adulterers, this device was a silencer. Imagine a French thief in 1633. The pear is shoved into his mouth because he lied. As the executioner turns the key, the metal expands, shattering teeth and pulverizing the jawbone. He wants to scream, but he can't. His mouth is locked open by the expanding metal. The horror of the pear is that it strips away the human ability to communicate. You cannot beg. You cannot confess. It turns a human face into a ruined mess of flesh. It is eternal silence, delivered by a cold metal screw. Medieval torture wasn't just punishment, it was entertainment. And no show drew a bigger crowd than the breaking wheel. The victim was tied to a large wooden wagon wheel, limbs splayed out. The executioner, wielding a heavy iron bar or hammer, would begin his work. He didn't swing wildly, he had a routine. Crack! The shin bone snaps. Crack! The thigh bone shatters. Crack! The arm bends where there is no joint. The goal was to pulverize every long bone in the body while keeping the victim alive. The crowd would cheer and place bets on how many blows you could take before passing out. But hell wasn't over. After your limbs were turned to jelly, they would weave your broken body through the spokes of the wheel like a grotesque puppet, then hoist the wheel onto a pole. You were left there, facing the sky, as the crows descended to peck out your still living eyes. Death could take hours, or even days. A slow, lonely end amidst the laughter of the crowd. If the rack pulled you apart, the scavenger's daughter crushed you into a ball of meat. Invented under King Henry VIII, this was an A-shaped iron frame with a hoop at the top. Your knees were forced against your chest, your heels against your buttocks. You were folded into the smallest possible shape. Then, the executioner tightened the screw.
I have you.
The pressure on the lungs and organs was catastrophic. Ribs cracked.
Yes, Father,
but the most horrifying part was the blood pressure. Compressed beyond the body's limits, the blood had nowhere to go. It would erupt from the nose, the ears, and even spray from the tear ducts and fingertips. Thomas Miag, a prisoner in 1581, described it as a body trying to eat itself. You weren't just in pain on the outside, you were exploding from the inside. It was like being packed into a suitcase made of your own broken bones. Visually, this might be the most barbaric. The victim was hung upside down, legs spread wide. Two executioners, holding a massive lumber saw, would begin cutting, starting from the crotch. Why upside down? This wasn't accidental. The position forced blood to rush to the brain, keeping the victim conscious for as long as possible. If they sawed from the head down, you'd die instantly. But from the bottom up, you felt the jagged teeth grinding through muscle, through the pelvis, into the abdomen. You would be wide awake, watching your own intestines spill out over your face, which was drenched in sweat and tears. Historical records suggest some victims were still screaming when the saw reached the navel, or even the diaphragm. It was a death where agony was stretched to the absolute biological limit.
You are safe
Forget the
now.
complex machines. Sometimes, nature is the cruelest torturer. Rat torture exploited primal fear. A metal cage, open at the bottom, was strapped to the victim's stomach. Inside were starving, panicked rats. The executioner would then light a fire on top of the cage. Driven by the intense heat, the rats had only one way to escape: down. They would claw through the skin, gnawing into the stomach and intestines to hide from the fire. The sensation of furry, filthy creatures burrowing inside your living organs is a horror beyond any Hollywood movie. Sigmund Freud considered this the ultimate psychological torture because it violated the integrity of the body in the most repulsive way
Look at it,
possible.
Kara. Just hold me.
You don't always need a saw or fire. Sometimes you just need a small clamp. The thumb screw. Place the finger in, turn the screw. Crunch. The knuckle shatters. The pain is sharp, blinding, but non-lethal. So they move to the next finger, then the next. It was precision torture, designed to drive a person mad without killing them. And then, the Spanish tickler. The name sounds playful, but the device was an iron claw, sharp as razors. The torturer used it to comb the victim, not combing hair, but combing flesh. It stripped skin and muscle right off the ribs and back. After a session with the tickler, a victim would look like an unfinished sculpture of raw meat. There wasn't an inch of intact skin left. Have you ever been so tired you couldn't keep your eyes open? Imagine wearing a metal device with two double-pronged forks, one end propped against your sternum, the other right under your chin.
Such a
It was
delicate
strapped
flower.
tight around your neck. If you knot it off,
Don't worry, you'll
the
feel
sharp
much worse
prongs
before
would
we are
pierce
done.
your chin and chest.
Look at
You were
him
forced to
squirm.
keep your head up
Fitting
and your
punishment for
eyes
a
open,
thief.
day after day. Sleep deprivation causes the brain to collapse, inducing hallucinations and madness.
But every time your head dropped from exhaustion, the stab of pain woke you
Please,
up.
God,
It was
save
torture
him.
that stole the
Grant
most
him
basic
peace
right
in
of
this
a
hour
living
of
being,
darkness.
the right to rest.
Have mercy
Many
on his
confess
soul.
to being witches just to be allowed to take the fork off and sleep forever. If you really angered a king, a quick death was a luxury you wouldn't get. Flaying, being skinned alive, was the penalty for traitors. The executioner, skilled as a surgeon, used a small, sharp knife to detach the entire skin from the body in one piece. The goal was to keep the skin intact, to nail it to the wall as a warning, and keep the victim alive. Imagine the air touching raw, exposed nerve endings and muscle tissue. The shock, the dehydration, and the indescribable pain
Scream
would
all you
last
want.
for hours.
No
In
one can hear you down
1307,
here.
the French
Quiet now,
knight
girl.
Pierre de
They're almost
Remy
here.
was flayed,
Is it his
his skin
God?
displayed as a gruesome reminder, never betray
Don't
the
move.
crown. And finally, the pinnacle of brutality and acoustic engineering, the brazen bull. A life-sized bull cast in solid bronze, hollow on the inside. The victim was locked in the belly of the beast. A massive fire was lit underneath. As the temperature rose, the bronze turned red hot, roasting the person inside. But the genius of this device was in the throat of the bull. A complex system of pipes converted the victim's desperate screams into the sound of a furious bull bellowing. The crowd outside didn't hear a human dying. They heard the music of death, the smell of burning flesh, the roar of the bull. It was a feast for demons. Legend has it that Perillos, the man who invented the bull for the tyrant Phalaris, became its very first victim. A poetic, bloody irony. So, there you have it. A tour through the darkest inventions of
Help
human
me,
history.
please!
Which one do you think you could withstand? Or would you surrender the moment you saw the pliers? We are lucky to live in the 21st century, where torture means slow Wi-Fi. But never forget, hidden deep in our DNA are memories of a time when humans treated each other worse than animals. If this list keeps you up tonight, drop a comment. Which device haunts you the most? The rack, the rats, or the burning bull? Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can explore more dark corners of history that your textbooks are too afraid to show you. Thank you, and sweet dreams, if you can.